Alright, so in the previous video we saw how to create a user-focused animation, so when the button is tapped the next image appears. In this video we want this to happen automatically. So I'm actually going to set this one as a challenge. Can you update this app so that the next button becomes a start/stop button? When you press start it begins the animation, and when you press stop it ends the animation. Go for it. Alright, hope you managed that. Really, all it involves is combining the code that we already have with a timer to automatically move the image on to the next one. So let's update the code of the button to start animation. And then jump back over to viewcontroller.swift. So what we're going to want to do to start the animation when the button is pressed, we'll need a timer. So let's create a timer as before, which is an object of the class timer with a capital T. And then when the button is pressed, we'll start off the timer, which we'll do in the same way that we did before. So it's timer.scheduled timer with a target and selector. So the time interval, I'm going to go for 0.1. It looks like 0.1 seconds is the delay for each of these. The target is the view controller, which is just self. The selector is our way of referring to the method that's called every time the timer ticks over. So let's create that method. I'll call it animate. And we're going to want that code in there. So it's the same code as we had before. It just happens automatically this time. So we create the selector with a hash selector. And then we're going to use view controller dot and then animate. User info, we don't need to pass any info here, so that's just nil, and repeats is true. Okay, so I'm just going to test that out before we add in the code to stop the animation. So we should now find that as soon as the animation button is clicked, then this timer will begin, and each time it hits 0.1 seconds, it'll run the animate method, which is up here, which will update the image and add 1 to the counter for next time. All right, let's take a look. And here we go. So tapping start animation. And we're off. There we go. So the animation is now happening completely by itself. Fantastic. So back over to our code then. We just want to be able to stop the animation as well. So as well as our counter variable, let's create an isAnimating variable, which is initially false. And then we want to check here when the button is tapped if it's animating, then we want to stop it animating, which we do with timer dot invalidate. And if it's not animating, then we want to animate it like that. So that should work, but I would like to update the actual text of the button, because at the moment it says start animating or start animation. So let's update the button text. In fact, to do that, we'll need to create a new outlet for the button, because we have an action for the button, but we don't have an outlet. So let's control drag from the button, create an outlet. I'll just call it button. And then in viewController.swift. So if we stop it animating, then we need to update the button text, which we do using set title. And the title that we want to set is start animation. And here we use just an empty pair of square brackets there. This is a new syntax for iOS 10 and simply represents an empty array. It's our way of saying set the title for the default state of the button. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing here. So if the timer is not going, we'll set it going and then set the title to allow the user to stop the animation if they want to. And just before we run that, we need to update the isAnimating variable. So if it is animating, then we stop it animating and set isAnimating to false. And if it isn't, we start it animating and set isAnimating to true. There we go. So now we should be able to both start and stop the animation by pressing the button, and quite nicely the button text will update to tell us what it's going to do when we tap it. Let's see. Here we go. So start animation, and off it goes, and then stop animation, stops the animation. Wonderful. Alright, so now we've mastered the art of stop frame animation like that. We're going to see a few other types of animation that we can use in our apps. So let's see what animations we can do. I'm going to bring in the main storyboard and just set up a few buttons for us, which will allow us to control our animations. So we're going to have a fade in. We're going to have a slide in. And we're going to have a grow. So you can do pretty much any type of animation this way, but we'll just use these three as the main examples. Once you've seen these, you'll be able to make any animation you like. Okay, so we'll start with our fade in. So let's create our action there. Fade in. And we'll have a slide in. And we'll have grow. Okay. So fade in first. So we'll start off by setting the alpha to 0, which we do using image.alpha equals 0. And that will essentially make the image invisible. And then we simply want to set the alpha to 1, but do it gradually. And we do that using UI view to get the view, and then animate with duration. And we'll choose the top option there. So the time interval is just the amount of time that we want the animation to take, which I'll keep as 1 second. And then in curly brackets, we put the output essentially of the animation, which in this case is going to be image dot alpha equals 1. Simple as that. Except we do need a self here because this is inside a closure. So to get it out of the closure and refer to the image as part of view controller, we use self. So again, you can think of a closure as something happening not on the main thread. And that's what's happening here because this is being done gradually in the background rather than in line with everything else. So here we go. Let's tap the fade in button. You can see we get a nice gradual fade in there. Easily done. Okay, now time for slide in. So for slide in, we first need to move the image off screen. So we'll do that using image.center, which just changes the center of the image. And we're going to change that to a CG point. CG there is short for core graphics. And all we need to do is to define an X and a Y. That is a horizontal coordinate and a Y vertical coordinate. So to get the X coordinate, what I'll do is I'll take the current X coordinate, which we get from image.center.x, and I'm going to subtract 500 from that. And that should move it to the left 500 pixels, which will take it off the screen. And the Y I'm going to leave the same. So it'll just be a slide in the horizontal direction. So we'll just set that to image.center.y. And then we use UI view .animate again with a duration, and we'll give it a slightly slower 2 second this time. And then after the animation, we want the image center to be, again, a CG point. And this time we want to move it 500 to the right of where it is. So remember, this image.center.x will now be off the screen. So we want to add 500 to it to get it back where it was before. And again, image.center.y is not going to change in this one. Whoops, and once again, I've forgotten myself. Very easily done. And in fact, we need to have it there and there. So again, anytime you're inside a closure, you need self to refer to something outside of that closure. So now, when the slide in button is pressed, it should make the image disappear and then slide it back in from the left. Here we go. So slide in, and there it comes. Beautiful. All right, finally then, let's do the grow animation. Hopefully you're getting the idea about how these animations work now. So with the grow animation, we're going to use image.frame, which allows us to set both the coordinates and the size of our image. So to do that, we're going to create a CG rect, which is going to have an X coordinate, a Y coordinate, a width, and a height. So this time we'll make it grow from the top left of the screen. So that is 0, 0, top left. And I'm also going to set the height and width to 0. So it's essentially invisible. And then you'll know what's coming next. We use UIView.animate with duration, time interval 1 again. And then we'll set self.image.frame to be equal to, again, core graphics rectangle with an X of 0, a Y of 0, and we'll set a width of 200 and a height of 200. There we go. So we now should find it'll grow out of the top left of the screen to be a square image with width and height 200 pixels each. And here we go. So tapping grow. I think you may have missed that one. We'll try it again. Tapping grow. There we go. So you get these nice smooth animations very, very easily. Here's a quick question for you. Why isn't this image quite at the top left of the screen? What's going on there? Did you figure that out? It's because we set the image to be aspect fit. So the frame of the image is actually in the very top left, but because the image is not a square, the frame actually goes round like this, and the image itself is only viewable slightly down from the top of the screen. All right, there we go. That takes us to the end of what we're going to see from animations here. Obviously, with any of these, you can combine a number of different animations. You can have different timings, etc. But now you've got the basics of animations, we're going to go on and do something a bit more interesting programming-wise. We're going to make our first fully functional game, that is tic-tac-toe.